Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online News Summary for Saturday, July 5th. While there are national holidays in Canada and south of the border this past week, there's still a lot to consider in the news. We'll start with a few Canadian stories intersecting privacy, including an Ontario data breach, the government of the Northwest Territories making changes that impact privacy in missing persons cases, and a BC case that intersects reasonable expectations of privacy in the workplace. We'll have our scan of Canadian stories that intersect or were informed by access to information. And we will then shift south of the border with more government chaos and legal battles. This week we'll wrap with a look at troubling privacy and access stories across the globe that include hiding official information, criminals targeting personal data, and actions that target religious groups at risk. Let's dive in. We begin in Ontario, where a major breach of home care patient information is under investigation. A group calling itself SiegeSec claims to have accessed and leaked data from over 200,000 clients linked to Ontario health programs, including personal medical and demographic details. The leak could also contain names, contact information, and medical supplies or equipment ordered. The Ontario Privacy Commissioner is now investigating, and experts are warning this breach could be among the largest of its kind in Canada, although it wasn't revealed when this breach took place. In the Northwest Territories, the government is asking for public feedback on its proposed Missing Persons Act. The legislation would allow police to request information like phone records, text messages, and GPS data to help locate vulnerable individuals. The legislation would also provide a system to inform individuals if their records were accessed during a missing persons investigation. While it's intended to protect lives, as privacy advocates, we would like to stress the need for safeguards to prevent misuse of personal data. And in British Columbia, a civil resolution tribunal has dismissed a claim and determined a woman was not entitled to damages under the province's Intimate Images Protection Act. The woman sought $5,000 in damages, which is the maximum amount one can claim under the act. The claim involved workplace images and nudity. In it, a man shared intimate photos of his former partner with her employer in a bid she claims was to discredit her. It's a complicated case that underscores the evolving boundaries of workplace privacy and digital harms. The decision says the applicant must first prove the respondent shared or threatened to share an intimate image depicting the applicant without their consent. If that is proven, then the applicant must show they are entitled to claim damages. It says most of the images submitted in this case met the first part of the test, but the second part was not. A key finding in the ruling is, quote, a person who takes otherwise intimate recordings of themselves at work does not have a reasonable expectation of privacy in those images to the extent they are shared with their employer for the purpose of investigating alleged misconduct, whatever the sharer's motives, end quote. Shifting now to Canadian stories shaped by access to information. We start with Patrick Quinn, LGI reporter at The Nation. In this article, Quinn reviews the Cree Nation Grand Chief candidates and their election platforms. Amongst them, Paul John Murdoch, as the first Cree member of the Quebec Bar and nephew of the late Billy Diamond, is proposing an Access to Information Act for journalists and the public. According to Murdoch, any correspondence with the Grand Chief should be shared with other leadership. He also said he'd give up his legal practice if elected to avoid potential conflicts of interest. Be sure to check the story in the show notes for Quinn's report on all the candidates. From Manitoba Hydro, newly released figures suggest the former CEO may have received over $800,000 in severance despite being dismissed 6 weeks into the year. Critics say the payout is excessive, especially given ongoing affordability concerns, and they're calling for tighter controls over executive compensation at publicly owned utilities. Manitoba Hydro is insisting the CEO was paid out according to the terms of her contract and that no severance was issued. Of concern, the figures are revealed in an annual Manitoba Hydro compensation report, while having been earlier denied release under Manitoba's Freedom of Information law, when the public body invoked a section of the law that allows them to not release personal information about a third party, using a FOIA clause to delay release of information that is proactively released in a relatively short time frame because it is in the public interest would seem to conflict with the spirit of the law. And finally, residents in the fire-ravaged Denair Beach, Saskatchewan, are demanding answers. Despite serious damage from last year's fires, the province has not responded to local calls for support. Criticisms arose over the lack of support given by the province, as well as how long it took for provincial firefighters to come to volunteer firefighters' aid. The Saskatchewan Public Safety Agency said there was little time to engage the fire. However, those who were there said there was plenty of time to keep the wildfire at bay. Almost half of the province's water bomber fleet were grounded due to inspections, repairs, and a lack of parts. A new air tanker also was not used because there were no trained pilots to fly it. The local journalism initiative reports that access to provincial response records has revealed just how little has been done, and residents say they've been left hanging. Turning to the United States, where privacy policy and politics are once again colliding. A politically motivated hacker has breached Columbia University student systems, leaking sensitive data. University officials say the attack was ideologically driven and are urging vigilance across higher education institutions. On the day of the breach, images of President Donald Trump's smiling face appeared on several public monitors across the Manhattan campus. A spokesperson for Columbia said it was unclear if the Trump photo display was connected to the data breach. Meanwhile, 20 U.S. states are suing the federal government after it allegedly shared private Medicaid data with deportation officials. The states argue the release of personal health information violates federal privacy protections. The sharing of data is especially concerning for immigrants, who may now be targeted because they sought medical services. This move seems to have been in the works since May, when the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services announced it would be reviewing some state roles to ensure federal funds have not been used to pay for coverage for people with, quote, unsatisfactory immigration status, end quote. In another twist, the nonprofit arm of Anne Wojcicki, the founder of 23andMe, has been approved to buy the troubled DNA company. This comes after serious data security breaches rocked the brand last year, raising new questions about the future of genetic privacy under nonprofit ownership. It is unsure if Wojcicki will step back into the CEO position. In a statement, California Attorney General Rob Bonta's office maintained that 23andMe's sale does not comply with genetic privacy law in the state, and said it was disappointed with the court's approval. You can also check out the show notes to find the summary of the joint investigation into the data breach at 23andMe by the Privacy Commissioner of Canada and the UK Information Commissioner. Elsewhere, more than 300 people have been charged in what U.S. officials are calling a $14.6 billion healthcare fraud takedown. Investigators say the schemes exploited vulnerable patients and misused government funds, further fueling concerns about how personal health data can be weaponized for profit. The scheme involved the stolen identities and personal information of more than 1 million Americans, according to the Justice Department. The U.S. Supreme Court has also upheld a Texas law that restricts access to online content deemed harmful to minors, specifically pornography. Adults would need to supply websites with a government-issued ID or use third-party age verification services. While the law claims to protect children, critics argue that mandatory age verification could compromise everyone's privacy by requiring ID scans for access to legal content. Related laws are cropping up in other states, with wide-ranging consequences for internet freedom. Pornhub, one of the world's busiest websites, has stopped operating in several states, including Texas, citing the technical and privacy hurdles in complying with the laws. Meanwhile, Fortnite's parent company continues issuing refunds after children were tricked into purchases. The game was found to allow kids to make purchases with the push of a single button, and sometimes by mistake. The case spotlights how dark patterns in digital design can exploit users, especially minors, by bypassing informed consent. And finally, Trump's latest smartphone venture is igniting debate. The former president's Freedom Phone claims to be US-made, but critics argue the components are largely foreign. The Federal Trade Commission requires that items labeled Made in the USA be all or virtually all produced in the United States. Based on that definition, the Trump phone is no longer claiming to be made in the USA, but now uses a variety of language to sell a foreign-made product as an American-proud design and is brought to life right here in the USA. It's another example of how national branding is often used to obscure deeper contradictions. We wrap today with troubling global stories where privacy and transparency are under threat. In the United States, major government reports on climate change have quietly vanished from public websites. Experts say the removals amount to censorship, undermining both scientific accountability and public access to vital information. The White House, which was responsible for the reports, said the information will be housed within NASA to comply with the law, but gave no further details. Searches for the assessments on NASA websites did not turn them up. NASA did not respond to requests for information. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which coordinated the information in the assessments, did not respond to repeated inquiries. Australian airline Qantas is warning customers after cybercriminals access personal data including names, contact info, and travel records. The company said in a statement that a cybercriminal targeted one of its call centers and gained access to a third-party customer service platform that holds records for 6 million passengers. The company has launched an investigation, but the breach raises serious concerns about how airlines handle and protect personal data. And in Europe, Denmark has arrested a man wanted in Germany for allegedly gathering intelligence on Jewish organizations on behalf of Iran. The suspect is accused of working for an intelligence service of a foreign power. The information leading to his arrest came from Germany's domestic intelligence service, prosecutors said. The incident underscores the growing risks of state-sponsored surveillance targeting religious and minority communities, raising urgent questions about digital safety, international cooperation, and human rights. As always, we hope you found today's stories help you stay informed about the latest issues surrounding privacy, information management, and public transparency. To help us keep the mics on, be sure to subscribe through FIPA News Monitoring, or consider a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music in today's show was composed by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining. A big FIPA thank you to all the contributors, reporters, and outlets that make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners, who help make this work successful. Stay safe and stay informed.